Good morning. Um, President Sardaro, thank you so much for this invitation. It's a deep honor, a great honor. Thank you.
Glad to have you.
I'd like to begin by saying that I do not speak or represent Asians or specifically Chinese in who and what we are in entirety. I can only share from my own stories and experiences. I encourage you to approach individual people, to be open-minded, to be willing to listen empathetically, and to learn from their perspectives and their stories. I'll be sharing my mission moment in 3 segments. First, I'll open with my personal stories as an immigrant. Second, I'll be identifying the gaps between our local churches today and the immigrant communities. And lastly, I'll highlight some challenges as well as provide a few applications. I was born in Hong Kong, a very small island southeast of Asia, formerly ruled by Britain for 156 years until July 1st of 1997. When my family uprooted and immigrated to San Francisco in Northern California back in 1991, 6 years before Hong Kong was handed back to China, I was 9 years old. Since then, I've actually grew up in the Lutheran Church of the Holy Spirit in San Francisco, where the founding pastor of that church was actually the pastor that baptized my dad in Hong Kong. So growing up as an immigrant child, I had no choice but to acclimate when we moved to a new and foreign place. I didn't resent it. It was my parents' choice of what they thought was best for their family and for each of their children. It's also my new reality. So no matter how difficult and hard it was to learn a new language, to make new friends, to live in a new environment, to eat new food, to learn a new sport, we just kept going. Over the years, we've built resilience to keep moving forward a day at a time. Eventually, we adjusted, adapted, and culturally assimilated. Having been an immigrant and an outsider, learning a whole new culture, language, and a whole new way of life was extremely challenging and really at times painful. Because both my parents were educators, my dad, a Hong Kong Lutheran school principal, as well as a Hong Kong Lutheran pastor, and my mom, a Hong Kong Lutheran teacher, our living room was basically filled with bookshelves, filled with dictionaries, encyclopedias, books, and Bibles in both English and Chinese. I can still picture this very clearly. On our bookshelves and tables were multiple English to Chinese and Chinese to English dictionaries with the blue and red cover for each of our 5 family members. Every homework assignments and letters were difficult to understand. Every word and every other word needed to be translated. The pain of having to learn a whole new language was especially evident for my parents. As older adults and themselves educators, it was a very humbling experience. But we kept learning and moving forward, an assignment at a time, a book at a time, a letter at a time, a day at a time. Learning a new language in a foreign place wasn't the only struggle. I was also completely torn between 2 cultures when it comes to my identity. Who am I? At home, there was a constant emphasis to remember and to embrace who I am and where I came from. Every Saturday, my brother, my sister, and I will attend Chinese school in Chinatown to maintain our Chinese language. In the afternoon, after Chinese school, we'll attend the church's bilingual Bible study. And on Sunday, we can only attend the bilingual worship service. There's this unspoken expectation that Cantonese, our native tongue, will be maintained and spoken at home. While at school, being an immigrant is already considered an outsider, and so I was treated very harshly. I was often made fun of due to the way I dressed and the way I spoke. Since I was the youngest coming to the States, being only 9 years old in 5th grade, I had a strong determination and a desire to learn and acclimate very quickly to the American culture. I wanted to speak like the Americans do without an accent. I wanted to dress like the American. I wanted to make sure that I would eat the American food served in school cafeteria instead of what others would perceive as weird or smelly lunches from home. I wanted to fit in and belong in the majority. But because of the tensions and the challenges identifying between 2 cultures, unknowingly within me gave birth to the rejection of being in one's own culture. I grew ashamed of being Chinese because I did not want to be different. I mean, who wants to be different? Being different, the experience of being different, being the outsider, being the stranger, led to being bullied, mocked, and rejected at school and among friends. So instead, to survive, to feel belonged, accepted, and loved meant I had to learn at a very early age how to navigate and live in speech and in appearances like the normal people. Without realizing it, and I'm not proud of it, my young mind began to take shape in rejecting others who are different as I became more Americanized. Because I wanted to belong, I didn't want to be associated with them. I had shame in my own culture and was intentionally denying who God created me to be in his very own image. I did not realize what I realize now, what the dominant culture was doing to me. To survive, I was pressured into denying who I was and be what the dominant culture wanted me to be. So why did we come to America, you might ask? Having seen and experienced firsthand the sacrifices my parents made for me and my sibling, it is pretty much safe to say that Asian immigrants are here because of their children's future. You know, on Father's Day, I posted a picture and a small verbiage on my profile, and my cousin from Hong Kong would comment, "Don't forget, he gave up his career so that you guys can be there right now." There's a constant reminder of our parents' sacrifices. While my parents' immigrant stories and my immigrant stories might not be the same as every other family's, recognizing that everyone has their own story and being willing to listen and learn is important for us to come to a place of understanding and grace. Now, during the last 1.5 years, I've been working in the San Gabriel Valley area, and I was able to stay connected to the immigrant community to continue listening and learning and helping them adjust in a foreign culture. In learning and listening, I've come to realize how big the gap really is between our churches today and our immigrant communities. I would like to share some of the things I have heard within the church body. But before I do, I would like to emphasize that none of these were said with any malicious intent, and I understand that they come from a place that lacked understanding, exposures, and experiences. Here are some of the things I have heard. Why can't they, referring to the immigrants, speak English? I got invited to a Chinese New Year dinner, but I don't want to go because I'm afraid to eat their food. Why are we doing all these family gathering activities, putting in all these efforts, and they're not even coming to church and becoming members? To be very honest with you, if I may, this is how I felt for the immigrant community. I felt judged for not being able to speak English. It isn't because we don't want to learn the language, but in our 20s and 30s, learning a whole new language is very challenging and painful. And on top of that, we work multiple jobs to make sure we can provide for the family. We want to make sure that there's food on the table, that there's money to go towards our children's tuition, and that our children feel a sense of security at home. You know, I can't understand that everyone has preferences when it comes to food. I know there are certainly foods I have tried and do not care for. But know that Chinese New Year is a major holiday we celebrate. It is as significant as Thanksgiving is for Americans, and Christmas is for Christians. So to be invited to a very intimate family dinner, especially during Chinese New Year, it means you are regarded as high honor and much respect. And so yes, I am truly offended when you judge our food as weird or yucky before even giving it a try. Who gets to judge what is normal food and what is not? If we look around us today, authenticity of food is highly contextualized. Japanese, for example, would not look at American sushi and call Japanese sushi. Because in their culture, our sushi is just not sushi. There is no cream cheese in sushi. There is no volcano rolls and California rolls in Japan. Lastly, why are we doing all these family activities, putting in all these efforts, and it doesn't grow our church memberships? Brothers and sisters, while I understand that church memberships and growth is very important, I also look at Jesus and I see intentional relationships and friendships as higher valued. We have a privilege to plant seeds in God's kingdom, and perhaps, just perhaps, one day, we might be blessed to see and experience the fruit. However, speaking from experiences, this could take years and years and years. but it begins with being with people. What a huge gap between our churches today and our immigrant communities. I thought to myself, how can I help expose the church to better understand and empathize with the immigrant communities in our neighborhood, whom we, as Christ followers, are called to bless, to serve, and to love? But I want to go deeper and ask, are you willing to listen empathetically and live out Christ's incarnational love towards the others? While I'm able to lean into their pain because of my past experiences as an immigrant, perhaps your willingness to listen can begin to bridge the gap and ease the pain a day at a time. Here are a few challenges and the opportunity to reach the Asian community today. These are from my personal experiences, so feel free to be creative as you pray about the different ways to reach out. I see two big challenges. First, Asians in general, again, not that every Asians fall into this generalization, but in general, we do live in a shame and honor culture, which means that anything that brings shame to self and to families, we will not openly disclose. This makes being honest and vulnerable very difficult, especially for first generation. So if we, as the body of Christ, if all we do is point out sins in their lives, I can say it can be very ineffective, especially without the context of a trusted relationship. Secondly, Asian has a collectivism culture, as opposed to Americans being highly individualistic. So what this means and looks like is that if a spouse or a child wants to become Christian, they have to consider very highly how their family feel. How can I honor God, but not dishonor my parents or my spouse? This could be very difficult for individuals to come to Christ. Yes, it's a hindrance and a roadblock, but the gospel can and will break through if we are culturally sensitive enough and patient enough. Here's a practical opportunity for us as a church. Asians generally are not very expressive when it comes to their love. Their love language is often expressed through giving. For example, parents work hard to provide for the family. Therefore, when parents work hard to provide, they really do lack presence and quality time spent with their children at home and in family. So with that said, many Asian families are actually hugely surprised by a very welcoming church. So hospitality from a faith community is highly welcomed. Invite them to your home. Share a meal with them. Ask them questions. Be interested and learn their stories. Pay attention where no one is paying attention. Knowing some of these challenges and opportunity to be hospitable, here are some applications in how to do Asian ministry in California context today. We must be intentional with our relationships with the immigrant communities. Ask us our stories, learn our history and culture, eat with us, be interested. Yes, it will require much patience, understanding, and grace, but I stand here as a living testimony. It will bear fruit in the long run. Be willing to journey with us and try our weird food. You don't have to like it. We just want you to experience it. Try it, it's fun. Chinese relationships and families are often built around the table. So table fellowship around food is one of our safe spaces to share life and to share love. So if you truly want to learn our culture and know us, be with us around the table. You know, Jesus definitely has had many meals with the most unexpected crowds around the table. Why do I suggest these? Not only because I'm a living testimony of a local church that was intentional with their immigrant community, but because I've experienced firsthand the fruits that God has blessed us with in the last 1.5 years out of the San Gabriel Valley area. Through building intentional relationships with families of the preschool who lives in the neighborhood, I know who is taking adult English class. I know who's about to take their citizenship test. I know who is struggling in their marriage. I know who is stressed because their child is wrestling with special needs. And I know who is curious about faith. Knowing these, I can be the church by offering my availability to perhaps help them with their English class assignments, with their citizenship test, for the church to provide workshops with Christian perspectives in marriage and disciplining children, and answer any questions about faith, meeting them exactly where they're at. As a church, what a wonderful opportunity to provide and connect immigrant communities, resources that they desperately need and unsure where to find. Just as Jesus was always with people, especially with the outsiders, the outcasts, and the strangers, like how he noticed and took time to be with the Samaritan woman at the well, or the 10 lepers, or had dinner, or a meal, maybe not dinner, with the tax collectors and the sinners. We can learn to be with others as he did in our very own neighborhoods. Change is hard. I experienced firsthand how hard it is as an immigrant growing up here, and change was the only constant in my life. The pain for immigrants is real. It is hard to be in a foreign place, to learn a new language and a new way of life. Know that we often struggle in isolation and loneliness. We adapt or we won't survive. At times, we become ashamed of our very own culture, our own ethnic identity, and our own God-given image. But as a church, you can make even the smallest changes to reach out, to welcome, and to include the immigrant communities. Changes that can bring the gospel message to these families, along with the messages of hope, love, and reconciliations. You know, we live in a world now filled with too many divisive messages that builds walls between people. But together as the church, let's commit to live out a very different and radical message that actually unites and brings people of all nations, tribe, and tongue together. I pray that all of us who makes up the church would intentionally make a commitment to remain missional, to truly strive for your church to reflect the community that you're in, to keep learning about our changing neighborhood, and stay close to God's missional heart for his people in the city. This is not my church. This is not our church. This is the Lord's church. And perhaps one day, if we are willing, we might even see a glimpse of heaven on this side of eternity. Thank you.